Hi, welcome to this corner of YouTube. My name is Faith, your local Janeite. Jane Austen may have written only 6 novels and 1 underrated epistolary, but her work has cultivated a massive fandom and has inspired many adaptations. However, there is another type of Austen-inspired genre that I feel doesn't get talked about as much, the Austen-Adjacent. There is no official or academic definition available, as far as I could find at least, but I feel Amanda Bennett from the blog Amanda Down the Rabbit Hole defines it best. These are books that are not strict adaptations or modernizations or variations on Jane Austen's works, but works that were influenced by Jane Austen or that heavily reference Jane Austen. In other words, it's literature written in the spirit of Austen. Austen-adjacent literature focuses on characters who exist outside of the Austen canon, and normally these characters are or become fans of Austen herself. This literature spans many different genres, from romance to mystery to even sci-fi. There are so many of these books that if I tried talking about them all, this video would be 5 hours long. So I'm going to talk about the 3 that I read, starting with Pride, Prejudice, and Personal Statements is a novel by Mary Pagonis about Elisa, aka Lise Tennant, a high school senior and Jane Austen fan who is going through the college admissions process. Like most students going through this process, Lise has to think about her future, and she is pressured to choose between going to a more financially viable school or pursuing her dream of studying English at her dream school, Pennington College. Just like how Austen criticizes the institution of marriage in her work, Pagonis criticizes the college admissions process. A huge part of the admissions process is making yourself sound as impressive on paper as possible, sometimes to an extent that can be impossible to achieve as a teenager. For example, Charlotte, one of Lisa's friends, is determined to get into Princeton University. She obsesses over having a high enough GPA and having as many interesting accomplishments on her paper as possible. That's why she decided the summer before to volunteer at an orphanage in India. When asked why India, not anywhere else, she says, "First, I thought about China, but my counselor was afraid some people on the admissions committees might not like that because of the human rights violations." Charlotte's concern for the orphans in India seems quite performative, but it's a product of the pressure that Lise and her peers face to stand out when applying for college. It has some eerie similarities to the Regency-era expectation of women to be highly accomplished in order to marry well. While dealing with applications, a romance blossoms when Hugh Fitzgerald, her dance teacher's nephew, comes to town. He comes from a rich family and is sort of snooty. Sound familiar? Unlike a certain beloved Austen character with those qualities, Hugh gets along with Lise and they start dating pretty soon after. Throughout the book, parts of Lisa's identity are challenged. This first starts when her dance teacher announces that she won't be involved in that production of The Nutcracker that year. Since ballet is something that she's proud of and puts a lot of work into, she questions her own talent in that field. It happens again when Hugh asks her to help him cheat on his college application. Hugh is a film student. Unfortunately, one of those types who thinks he's going to be the next David Fincher with no talent to show for it. Which I have to say, as a former film student, this does not represent all of us. Earlier in the book, Hugh convinced Lise to write the screenplay for the short film he needs to submit for his college application. Because he didn't read the admissions requirements closely enough, he didn't realize that he was required to also write the script, so instead of trying to work his own way around it, he asked Lise to let him take the credit for her work. And Lise agrees because this was for Pennington, and she believed that if he got in, he would definitely be able to go because he could afford it, unlike her, who couldn't. The more time Lise spends with Hugh, the more she realizes that he hates on anything that isn't film. He dismisses Austen as lacy, bonnety, and girly. He also openly hates on ballet, which makes her feel like she can't express those parts of herself around him. Things come to a head when Lise learns that Hugh was cheating on her with her sister. Yeah. Turns out her Darcy was a Wickham the entire time. Sensibly, Lise breaks up with Hugh. Afterwards, she starts questioning the things she believed were wrong. Her desire to be an English major, her judgment of other people, and even her fondness for Austen, since that influenced how she saw Hugh. A major element of Lisa's identity is her love of Jane Austen. It's part of the reason why she wanted to be an English major. Some of her happiest moments happen when she is discussing Austen with other people, especially her English teacher, Mr. Clark. She bonds with him over Austen throughout the novel, while they share their interpretations of the books. After her breakup with Hugh, Lise takes the time to reflect on her mistakes, and eventually she finds a way to make things work for herself. She comes to forgive her sister, cuts you off of her life, and manages to negotiate a financial aid package so she can go to Pennington, study English, and happily be a Janeit. She is also better prepared to study English there because of the guidance that she had from Mr. Clark. Pride, Prejudice, and Personal Statements is a coming-of-age story about the importance of staying true to yourself. Though that message is cliche, it's still relevant because if you don't know who you are or what you want, then how can you decide what future is right for you? And if there's one thing to take away from the book, it's that you shouldn't waste your time with people who make you feel ashamed to let your Jane Austen freak flag fly. Lime Park is a play by Janeites about Kavita, a children's book editor who loves Jane Austen so much that she books a trip to go on a Pride and Prejudice-inspired tour of England with her friend Violet, which includes a visit to Lime Park, which is where they filmed all the Pemberley scenes in the 1995 Pride and Prejudice. Kavita is a stereotypical Jane Austen fan. She has all of the lines from the 1995 miniseries memorized, she references Austen any chance she gets, and she secretly hopes to find her Mr. Darcy. Her character is a prime example of how Jane Austen can be a little too romanticized by fans and pop culture in general. I mean, that's not to say that she doesn't deserve the hype. This is the same person who wrote, "If I loved you less, I might be able to talk about it more." At the same time, the recognition for her romances sometimes overshadows the other things that she writes about in her work, like gender dynamics, class divides, and criticizing the institution of marriage. And even the romances she wrote about weren't perfect. Elizabeth and Darcy had to overcome a good amount of personal and societal hurdles before they got together. At the beginning of the play, Kavita is firm in her standards for what makes a good match for her. As long as he measures up to Mr. Darcy, he's a good fit for her. When she gets to England, she believes that she finally finds a worthy suitor and suave intellectual tour guide Thomas. It only takes one semi-flirtatious back and forth to convince her of this. Because, an initial disagreement with a snooty Englishman is the ultimate sign of true love. Thomas isn't perfect, though. He shows a few red flags. Like when he shows up to Kavita's and Violet's hotel room and asks Violet to step out so they can talk. Or when he shushes Kavita before kissing her, a trope which I've always found kind of gross. Or when he puts down members of an online Austen fan club because he thinks that they obsess over Mr. Darcy too much. Despite this, Kavita is smitten. When Violet asks why she wants to be with him, she replies, "But isn't that what love is? A fantasy? When you're so wrapped up that you don't even notice anything else?" At the same time, Henry, a mutual friend that Violet has set up with Kavita to no avail, questions her belief in love and Austen. After learning about her and Thomas's relationship, he asks her, "I was wondering how anyone knows that the right person is the right person. Is this Thomas really your Mr. Darcy?" Another thing that Henry questions her about is her status as a Jane Austen fan while being a person of color. He thinks that her desire to embody everything Austen is very curious. It's so colonial. His words exactly. The challenging of people of color who exist in Austen spaces is something that is unfortunately true to life. Which brings me to an important point. Even though Austen has appealed to audiences of many different backgrounds, there is still unfortunately pushback against marginalized identities, including people of color who want to enjoy Jane Austen. In the article Recognizing the Enduring Whiteness of Jane Austen, essayist Marcos Gonzalez talks about his experience studying Mansfield Park while being the only person of color in his classroom. I write one of my first seminar papers on how Lady Bertram's pug symbolizes a kind of indolence and excess the Bertram family can have due to Sir Thomas Bertram's slave estates in Antigua. These are the only comments on the paper justifying why I receive a B letter grade. The connection between Lady Bertram's pug, the luxury of their home, and colonialism in your reading of Mansfield Park isn't a very strong one. My reading of Mansfield Park challenged the legitimacy of the ways of reading this professor only knows how to do and wants others to do. Marginalized readers have a hard time enjoying the classics because our teachers and professors, beginning in primary school and ending in graduate school, have for so long dictated our ways of reading. I want to read Austen. I have a voracious appetite to read literature from every historical period and place on this planet. But I must read them from this body built of colonization, this body built from the pillaging and massacring and dispossessing of the indigenous peoples of the Americas. Does the note from Gonzalez professor mean that they're racist? No, but it is indicative of some of the pushback against POC perspectives in the realm of Austen. And unfortunately, some of the comments under that same article seem to prove my point. To some, the idea of discussing race in relation to Jane Austen seems irrelevant because she was a white author who wrote about mostly white people, in a class that was predominantly white. And yes, Jane did write what she knew, but that shouldn't mean that people of color should be banned from reading and commenting on it. The book Austen-ish, The Evolving World of Jane Austen Fans by Holly House and Zoe Weinstein adds that representation of Austen characters in media is not helping this. The assumption that Austen's novels are populated by only white people likely does come from representation in contemporary film. Defending the casting of only white actors in Austen adaptations as an intent to maintain historical accuracy not only rejects the reality of Austen's England, but could also be subconsciously saying to people of color who might otherwise embrace Austen that this is a world that does not include them, and therefore is not for them. This type of thinking only discourages people of color from engaging with Austen, and limits diversity of thought when it comes to discussing her. And this type of exclusion only encourages gatekeeping within the fandom, which is at best obnoxious and at worst discriminatory. Things do finally seem to be taking a turn in the right direction. There are now more inclusive fan spaces for people of any identity to enjoy Austen, like virtual JaneCon, and things are improving in mainstream media as well, with more racially diverse casting in period adaptations of Austen's work. And it's about time, because Austen should be for anyone to enjoy regardless of their background. Now back to regularly scheduled programming. Kavita is certain that her views on Thomas are correct until she meets Mrs. Dale, his mom, at a Regency-themed ball. She learns from her that Thomas is actually still living with her and that he's been working on his dissertation for 11 years, which is way longer than he was supposed to initially work on it. And it's not because he had to take a delay or anything, it's because, in Mrs. Dale's words, he gets distracted easily. And in other words, that means that he's pretty aimless. These are things that clash with what Kavita wants in a romantic partner. That same night, she also deals with a disastrous declaration of romantic feelings from Henry, which, long story short, leads to a brawl between him and Thomas and leaves Kavita mortified. After the events of the ball, Kavita comes to the realization that she is more of a Catherine Morland than Elizabeth Bennet, romanticizing the world through the lens of her beloved Austen. So she decides to end things with Thomas, take a break from her Austen obsession, and engage with the real world more. The play ends with Kavita planning a trip to India and reconciling with Henry platonically. In a way, Lyme Park serves as a cautionary tale. It reminds us that while Austen wrote a lot of good romances that we love to read, we probably shouldn't use them as a reference for our own. There's an anecdote about Winston Churchill finding comfort in Jane Austen during World War II. While he was sick with pneumonia, he had his daughter Sarah read Pride and Prejudice to him. I had long ago read Jane Austen's Sense and Sensibility, and now I thought I would have Pride and Prejudice. Sarah read it to me beautifully from the foot of the bed. I had always thought it would be better than its rival. What calm lives they had, those people. No worries about the French Revolution or the crashing struggle of the Napoleonic Wars. Only manners controlling natural passion so far as they could, together with cultured explanations of any mischances. Natalie Jenner's The Jane Austen Society takes place in the UK shortly after World War II. The novel features 6 characters who are affected by trauma or regret, some of it caused by the war, some of it caused by their own situations. Adam Berwick is a lonely farmer who struggles to connect with others. Dr. Benjamin Gray is the town doctor who grieves his wife 4 years after her death. Adeline Grover is a former school teacher who lost her husband in the war and her son in childbirth not too long after. Frances Knight is a descendant of Jane Austen who is repressed by the harsh opinions of her aging father and the regret of her lost opportunity for love with their family lawyer, Andrew Forrester. Evie Gray is a young maid who works for Frances and spends a lot of time studying books in Austen's library, and she has the time to do it since she left school a few years back to get a job in order to financially support her family. Mimi Harrison is a movie star who is unfairly getting less opportunities in Hollywood due to her being an aging actress at the ripe old age of 35. So she moves to England with her fiancé in order to start a new life. Which sounds promising, but it's not helpful when he is more concerned with trying to find his next opportunity to make money than spending time with his wife. Like Churchill, they find solace in their love of Jane Austen. And due to their love for Jane Austen, these people who seem like they would have nothing in common come together to form the Jane Austen Society with the purpose of preserving her home in Chawton. They have to overcome many legal and financial hurdles in order to obtain Chawton House, since James, Frances' father, prevents her from inheriting the majority of the estate in his will after he dies. Eventually, they find a way to get Chawton Cottage with the help of Mimi's funding, Mr. Forrester's legal expertise, and Evie's knowledge of the Austen Library, along with the other members helping in whatever way they can. Due to their involvement in the society and the efforts that they put in together, they find community with each other and start healing from their own traumas. Adeline, who was in a grim state of depression before, bonds with Dr. Gray over Jane Austen, and as they grow closer, they eventually fall in love, get married, and start a family of their own. Adam and Frances finally feel like they have a place in the world, and Frances no longer fears what her father thinks due to the fact that he's not around anymore, and she feels like she's more free to express herself. Mr. Forrester, free from James's scrutiny, gets the courage to propose to Frances, and she of course accepts because that love that she had for him is still there after all those years. Evie finally gets to put her knowledge of the Austen Library to use by contributing the catalog she made of every book inside. She also gets another chance to finish her education when Adeline offers to tutor her. Mimi ends things with her fiancé, learning that he's a pretty self-centered person. Funnily enough, the straw that broke the camel's back was his plan to join a group of investors to buy Chawton House and turn it into a golf course. Thankfully, that plan does not succeed. If you're familiar with the real-life Jane Austen Society in the UK, then you likely know this wasn't how it was actually founded. The real history of it is that it was founded in 1940 by an artist named Dorothy Darnell. This book is a revisionist history of the founding of Chawton House, but that doesn't mean the importance of Austen's legacy is any less real. This book conveys Austen's ability to bring people together and help them heal. That's not to say that Austen is a substitute for therapy, but she is always there when you need her. Even though these works are pretty different, they all have one thing in common: expressing a deep love for Jane Austen. In a way, Austen-adjacent literature is a love letter to Austen. It shows how her work can thoroughly entertain us, inspire us to grow, and foster community. The fact that themes from her books are applied to stories set in modern and historical eras shows that her work is timeless. Most importantly, Austen-adjacent literature shows how Austen inspires us to create our own stories, adding something new for fans and readers in general to enjoy. So, if you're a Janeite who wants to read more Austen content, give Austen-adjacent literature a try. It may not be by the same author, but in its essence, it's still Austen-ish. Thank you, Virtual JaneCon, for allowing me to present this year. I look forward to seeing everyone else's amazing presentations.